Um, so I need to share my screen a bit, don't I? Before I disappear behind a blank slide, um, I um, I put myself up for this one because so the bit of background, put myself up for it because I had a recurring off flavor and taints in my beers. Not all of them, but some of them um, over almost a year. And I kept getting the same problem with some batches, with some recipes. So, which was annoying because last summer I was in the middle of brewing about 8 or a dozen corny kegs for a mate's wedding. And in the middle of the brew, they a whole batch went off. And not just one batch, but I'd done a kind of double brew batch. So I had 2 fermenters with this off flavor, but I'd also repitched the yeast onto another double batch. So I turned around and I had 4 off batches that I had to rebrew in quite short order, which I did manage to do, and it was all fine. And I blitzed the gear within an inch of its life and seemed to clear up the problem. Except that afterwards, I used the same recipe and some of the same gear that had been cleaned and had been fine. And the thing came back, whatever it was, which kind of prompted me to do a bit of an investigation. So this is part of that. I don't promise to have got to the bottom of it. Don't promise to have all the answers, but it's kind of, I wanted to, this is as much a presentation for me as it is for everybody else. So I'm kind of talking to myself a lot of the time in this. So if I'm saying things that sound condescending or patronizing, I'm talking to myself. I'm not for a second thinking that you don't know how to clean and sanitize. But I've gone back to basics. So I'm going to try and make it a bit of an open discussion as well. I'm going to go through my process, chip in if you can see any glaring errors, but that's kind of it. So that's the background. So what I'll try and do is share my screen. Is that correct? Share screen. And I have that. Is that working?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. And hilarious title. Awesome. Yes, cleaning up my act speaks for itself. So I'm going to try and work this video. Oh, it's okay. I can't. Sorry about the noise. I'm going to try and talk over my own noise. I can't seem to turn the volume down for that. Never mind. So cleaning, it is fun. It's not boring. And as I was trying to explain, there's nothing more boring than pouring away at least a dozen batches down the bath every so often. That's me saying oh shit. So the point of this is really to make better beer for me, for everyone else. So this is me. Yeah. So anyway, that was just an illustration of me chucking beer away and, hoping not to do it anymore. Okay, next slide. No, next slide. So I'm going to try and cover the basics. As I say, I make no apologies for going back to basics because it's partly me as well. A tiny bit of science because otherwise it becomes a science lesson rather than a improving your beer lesson. I might add a slide or two with some extra science to it later, but for the minute, I'm going to try and get through it. Look at some of the off flavors that are produced by bad hygiene or contamination or bad luck. I'll run through my process, see if you can spot any errors, as I say. I'll kind of hand out to a couple of other people, 2 or 3 people, and if anyone else wants to chip in with their methods, their process, their tried and tested, or their tips or questions. The other thing I was going to try and do was to collect a few questions if we didn't have the answers, and then go off and find the answers, re-edit the video before it goes up, and then hopefully have edited in either the answers or stuck some answers on the end, or something like that. Let's see how it goes then. Because it's cleaning and sanitation, it's nothing about brewing, nothing about recipes, nothing about gear, nothing. It's literally cleaning and sanitizing your gear so that you can make nice beer, really. It's kind of the point. Dun, 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 dun. The basics. So every book, every website, every brewer, sanitation is the top priority, and it's the kind of thing you just go, can I just put the hops in? Yeah, or something. But every single book, I think page 2 of John Palmer's How to Brew has got his top 5 priorities for brewing great beer. 1, sanitation; 2, fermentation control; 3, yeast management; 4, the boil; and 5, the recipe is like right down there. The point being that if you nail, I guess, the cleaning and the sanitation, you can churn out any recipe, as long as your process is good. But so many problems get introduced throughout the whole thing, down to bad hygiene. And the problem with brewing, I guess, is that you don't find out for a month or 2 months or 6 months further down the line, when either a lacto has bitten after a couple of weeks, or Brett has bitten, and you don't really notice for 6 months. Different to, say, making bread or making your dinner, where you find out that day whether it's worked or not, or whether it tastes good, and then you get another go the following day. But with brewing, there's a long lag time before finding things out sometimes, and if you can nail it all, then at least you can sleep a bit better, maybe. Some definitions, which you probably all know, but you might as well ram them home. If it's cleaned, it's free from all the dirt, the stain, the organic matter, the food, basically, that any microorganisms might find tasty. Or it's basically, if you ate your dinner with dirty cutlery off a dirty plate, that's what your not cleaned fermenters are like. I'm saying that to myself. Sanitized, 90 to 99.999% removal of microorganisms. And that is generally good enough for brewers. You can have a stage further is a log. Stage further is is disinfected, which is not usually necessary, and then sterilized, which will kill every living thing within the radius and can even deactivate bacterial spores. So that's the basics. Then the off flavors that can be produced are myriad, basically. That's the BJCP fault list. And it's the equivalent of the list that's down the side of the score sheets when you judging a competition. And as you can see, about half of them, although can't quite zoom in, I'll try and zoom in a second, read them out. All the major ones are listed as check for infection or something like that. So we've got, I'm just going to read a couple out from the top. Alcoholic hot has got check for possible infections. Diacetyl, DMS, medicinal, metallic, musty, solvent, sour acidic, smoky phenolic, vinegary. So a lot of the main culprits in there are, for the sours, flavors are things like lactobacillus, which is fine if you want a nice sour, but if you weren't expecting it, it can very quickly turn beer sour pretty much overnight, or at least in a couple of days, which is how kettle souring works, of course. Acetobacter will make your beer vinegary, and that's the presence of oxygen, which you could also argue is unsanitary for beer, unless anyone is having a cask beer, of course, and that's what makes cask beers go vinegary, the introduction of oxygen, but also acetobacter grows in that medium. So those are the off flavors. The other off flavors can also be kind of caused by a byproduct of poor hygiene, which means your yeast health has been affected, which can cause the other off flavors down, which are down to fermentation. So acetaldehyde, all of those other ones. If your yeast is suffering. So it's useful to learn to recognize the off flavors by smell and by taste and what causes them. And one of the better ways is to become a judge or learn how to do it if you fancy. It can help you make better beer, but you need to practice what you preach as well, which is just what I'm saying to myself. But it's a good way in, and it's a good help to identify what's going on. In my batches that went off, it was mainly a lacto, and there were a couple that had some bad yeast. So there was a lot of lacto infection within a couple of days of brewing some of these beers. So they'd come out of the fermenter, gone into the keg. Sometimes it happened in the fermenter. So part of the tracking down was which part of the gear, which part of the tubing, which part of the process. To begin with, it could have been anywhere, it could have been anything. So it was a matter of picking off the culprits one by one, really. So as I say, it was sours. It was just annoying when it's a porter because it just shaves the entire malt flavor off the bottom of your beer and makes it sour. And I mean, there are ways of rescuing something like that. If it's a clean sour, you can make a sour out of it, or pour a couple of bottles of dregs of Orville into it and let it sit for 6 months and have a mixed fermentation porter. But I've got a lot of those now. Got enough. So as I said, the sauce could have been anything, including, I worried at one point, fermenting the hot sauce, which obviously requires lactobacillus to eat away at the chilies. So it could have been that as well. And as I say, not necessarily have worked it all out yet, but it's part of the investigation. All right, next. So cleaning, take it from the pros. There's our friend on the right, who jokingly, but not jokingly, refers to himself as head of cleaning of Elusive Brewery. And He looks very happy about it. But a few quotes as if we need them. Poor hygiene can wreck a beer like nothing else. That's John Palmer. I subscribe to the craft beer and brewing American thingy. There's some great videos in there, and there's I was watching this one the other day with this guy who's did a video series about how to fix stuff in your brewery. So he's like a mechanic a little bit, but also did quite a bit, did a good section on cleaning and sanitizing as well. Half shook his head. Clean and sanitize, clean and sanitize. That's the same. Sanitation is critical to brewing good beer. That's Brad Smith, who does the Beersmith podcast. Also, if you read any book, any website, talk to any brewer, as we say, it's cleaning. So this is what I use, and this is kind of part of the back to basics that I was looking at. So we're probably going to end up, no spoilers, but I'm going to end up doing a full circle of coming back to PBW, Star San, and iodophor sanitizers, because they're very specifically made for brewers, home brewers particularly, but also seems many commercial brewers will stick by it as well. We will kind of talk about some of the stronger cleaners and sanitizers in a little bit, where but I think basically wanted to stick with the family and pet friendly cleaning and sanitizing to start with, at least. And if you follow the instructions, as everybody says, follow the manufacturer's instructions and you should be fine. So part of my investigation, I kind of did this anyway, but sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I'd cut a corner here and there and think it would be fine. Didn't, maybe the Star San had been hanging around for a month longer than I would normally have done, something like that. So as part of this investigation, I made all fresh solutions of all of these up to the manufacturer's instructions, follow all the instructions properly, like my first day at school, my first day at proof school. And thus far, things seem to be okay. So this is the mix for PBW, 25 grams in 5 liters of hot water, or if you've got like I've got a Braumeister, so there is no pumps and piping or tubing between any of my vessels. But if people do have that, then the recommendation is up to 60 to 80 centigrade for 30 minutes. Does that sound right to people who use those things? So very hot.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, about 70. I mean, it sounds like a long time, 30 minutes. I would have thought something like 15 would have done the job with those kind of chemicals, but yeah.
Because otherwise it's overnight. I soak it at a lower temperature for longer, which one hopes has the same effect. So with the sanitizer, 50 minutes in 10 liters of cold when a bottling, or warm water. Contact time, 2 minutes. Drain and air dry, and the shelf life is quite long with Star San. The air drying aspect, I think is there so that people, because it's a no rinse sanitizer, I forgot to add that in. It's specifically no rinse, and the reason recommend air drying. They just don't want you to use tap water because there's the slight risk of bacteria in your tap water, which there isn't, is there? But you know, better safe than sorry. And also air dry so that you don't dry it with a cloth that you've been wiping the floor with or something like that. So that's the reason for air drying. IO-Star I've been using quite a bit, especially in trying to kill whatever has been running rampant around this brewery. Partly because it kills more, or mainly because it kills more bugs than Star San. So it'll kill wild yeast, Diastaticus yeast, and the other wild yeast of Brett as well, which is quite easy to kill anyway, I think. But it's like a level up. You can also make the solution a bit stronger into a disinfectant, which requires rinsing, just to avoid a slight off flavor, or so that it doesn't discolor your tubes and your piping. Sorry, I'm flicking. I don't know. I hope that's not too distracting and you can see the slides. Are the slides all right? My picture's flicking, but the slides all right.
The slides are fine.
Okay, cool. When I had about the fifth sour off flavor in the wedding beers I was mentioning earlier, I turned to IO-Star and blitzed everything like crazy. Took everything apart. There's some pictures of that in a minute. So and that seemed to keep everything at bay so far. So now I kind of alternate between sanitizers to keep the bugs guessing, as it says. But I mean, the joke there is it's to stop what do you call it? Bacteria getting used to it. What's that thing called? They build up a tolerance, don't they? You know that thing.
Climatizing.
Thanks. Okay. Odor also has that slightly reassuring hospital smell. It's got a short shelf life is the only thing, so you need a fresh batch of that every day. But it's reusable kind of during the day, so I make it up, and it has that nice amber color, which fades when it's not when it becomes inactive. So you can kind of see visually that it won't be working anymore. I normally line up a whole bunch of stuff and clean everything with the same batch that I've made up. And that's true with PBW and Star San, and as well. It's kind of trying to do a whole load of cleaning all in one hit, just to save resources, really, and hot water. And also you get in the swing of it, don't you? Put some music on, get a beer out, get in the swing of cleaning, get enjoyable. And okay, next one.
So,
right. So I wasn't expecting him to start straight away.
So Steve, could I quickly jump in there? About Star San on the previous slide. Quite a few people have had conversations about what water to use and how long does it last. Usually when people use tap water, it lasts a month or two and it gets a bit murky. And also if you put some pipes into it, the plastic gets all slimy, and I think there's some sort of reaction. Most people use RO water. I found once I started using RO water with Star San, it lasted a lot longer. And I've now got a big bucket of it that I just keep. And it doesn't get murky and you don't get that sliminess. And I don't know what that sliminess is from or anything. But I think it's just worth noting, if you do have an RO system or access to RO water, definitely use your star sand with RO water.
Yeah, I'd second that. Yeah, I think the acid, the phosphoric acid in the star sand precipitates out the calcium carbonate in the water.
Yes, I think that's exactly what it does. Yeah.
So yeah, you're better off if you can use, sort of some, sort of like RO or distilled or whatever you get. Yeah, I'd say the only other thing I think I read about star sand was the air drying is to do with the pH going up as it dries. Because it's quite low pH, and apparently the air drying, as it dries, you get a very thin film of water, but that thin film of water, the pH goes right up at the end, and that was, I think, the point of the air drying. Might be wrong, but something I thought I'd read somewhere.
Oh, okay. Let me check that out, because I have heard that as well.
I've also read that if you leave the star sand that is left in the sanitizer that is left in the inside of a bottle or a can, if too much is left in there, it can be a key source of oxygen in then your packaged beer. I mean, quite how infinitesimal that is, I don't know, but yeah.
Star sand in the bottle.
Well, so I used to just using one of those squirty things, give the bottle and straight onto the bottler pretty much 2 minutes later, and probably didn't take too much care with air drying. And now I probably take a bit more care just to see if I can dry out the bottle a bit more before it goes on, because apparently the film of liquid that's left contains a certain amount of oxygen, and you're trying to nail, getting rid of as much as possible. It was a commercial brewer who they'd got their own oxygen, very sophisticated oxygen testing stuff, and they narrowed it down to that being one of the key sources of oxygen in their finished beer.
I watched a Malt Miller video last night. They released yesterday, and it was where they were down at Verdant, and Verdant have got some sort of technology down there where they deoxygenate the water that they use for this sort of stuff. So yeah, that's a thing.
Oh, I see. So the water, sorry, the oxygen in the water that you use to dilute the star sand.
Yeah.
You mean, oh, God. Wow, that's harsh. Man.
Isn't that called boiling? Deoxygenating water is boiling.
That would do it.
I guess so.
I also think if you're ever worried about if it's still active after a couple of months or whatever, you can just check the pH and add a little and top it up if it rises, because it will rise a little bit over time.
Yeah, I use those cheap pH strips for doing that. It's easier than getting a pH meter up and running, but those strips are ideal for that.
And I've done it both ways with tap water and RO, and the pH has managed to stay stable for months. And I get it below 3. I get it to like 2.5 or something like that, which isn't so not so acidic. I think Coca-Cola is 2.5 pH or something anyway. So quite low. There's a lot of sugar in there to balance it, so you don't notice. But yeah, with both tap water and RO water, I find it's lasted like 6 months and more. But the tap water makes the solution go cloudy straight away. And I think that's what you're saying about the calcium carbonate in the water. It seems to react straight away, and then it precipitates onto all of your stuff and makes it go slimy. And you wash it off, it's fine, but don't need to have that hassle if you can use RO water, which does take that sliminess away. Right. So I can stop matey talking when I flick slides.
Is that the iodine based one? You have to rinse that after
No, that's a no rinse as well.
Okay.
At the right dilution, 25 parts per million. The instructions, I was gonna do like a table and stuff of the ideal solutions and dilutions and all of that, but it's on the left, it's on the label, and what I've got on there is the right dilution, but yeah, so that's a no rinse measurement, whatever the word is. All right. The cleaning and the sanitizing chemistry, I'm not a chemist, so I had to find someone else to do this bit for me. I was actually trying to find out how to clean my bike chain of all its grease and crap that had built up over the winter. It's really hard to cycle. So it was all gummed up full of grit and oil and stuff like that. And I wanted to know if you could use washing up liquid on your chain, whether that would, neat washing up, that would be fine. And I came across this guy who's on a motorbike YouTube channel. And in the middle of it, he dropped this bit about how surfactants, detergents work, which is what PBW is, what our brewery cleaners kind of do, how they clean the sides of the vessel and all of that. So rather than me wittering on, I'm gonna give you like 20 seconds of this guy who just explained it to me, and I went, oh right, okay. Because I never really quite got my head around surfactants. People were always saying things like, well, it makes water wetter, or it reduces the surface tension of water. I don't understand that. I don't get what you mean. Rubbish chemistry. Anyway, this guy, hopefully this is queued up. Bear with me if it's not.
Sorry, the washing up liquid contains salts that will cause your bike to rust. So
there's a lead in
Professor
bit.
Bob Eden, PhD, because he's got a master's degree and a doctorate in corrosive science and engineering. This is what I learned. The term salts covers a very wide range of anions that dissolve in water. And while washing up liquid does contain a salt, it's an active ingredient that shouldn't be confused with road salt. So some anions, like chloride, sodium chloride is table salt, can pit metals, while others, like chromium, protect metals, but they damage the environment. Others, like anionic surfactants, will degrease metals. Now, an anionic surfactant is a chemical that will dissolve both in water and in oil and grease. And when these surfactants dissolve in water and come into contact with oil, the surfactant anions spontaneously form zillions of imperceptibly small bags containing that oil, which is now dissolved inside the bag. Since the outside of the bag dissolves in water without the bag breaking open, it was washed away through rinsing. That's how cleaning works.
And that's how cleaning works. So that made things a little bit easier for me. So the chemicals dissolve the grease and then you can wash them off. It's kind of, I mean, that's how soap works, right? If you kind of sing happy birthday twice to yourself while you're washing your hands and you find you've got squeaky clean hands after, because the soap has broken down all the grime, as well as killing all the bugs as well. Anyway, sounds like I don't wash. Sounds like a revelation, but I do know how to wash. All right, so once you've got a clean vessel, it's the lower pH breaks down the cell walls and kills the bugs, the cells of bacteria and your microorganisms, and kills them. That's with an acid sanitizer. Okay, I'll crack on. Any
grease. And when these surfactants,
I know. Okay. So I'm just going to run through what I do. I've kind of probably given clues to it already. So this is if I use. That's chemicals up top. At the bottom, there's a microfiber cloth, some gloves. There's one of those, what are they called? What's that yellow scrubber thing called? It's the American thing. It goes soft in hot water, and it's really good for non-scratching cleaning of plastic vessels. The thing behind it is a copper cloth, and that's really good for cleaning stainless steel, because copper is softer metal than stainless. It won't scratch it, and it's, if you're trying to get wort stained stainless clean, it's really good for Scrub Daddy. Thanks, Darren. Yeah, it's Scrub Daddy. They're really useful. It's for the copper cleaner is really good for stainless. It's it cleans like magic, like a normal cleaning cloth would. It's metal on metal. Sounds counterintuitive, but again, that's apparently physics and chemistry. And a toothbrush. Bless you. And a toothbrush, because you so you can get into into the corners. Right. So when I clean, the hot side cleaning is easy. The Baumeister is boiled, the wort is boiled, and then I clean all of the stuff that's been in the all-in-one brewing machine, because it's been pasteurized at 78 degrees during a mash out. So that only gets a clean in hot water, to be honest. And I use chiller water for that, so you can't quite see that, but there's a couple of hoses in the middle of the frame there, which are coming out of the chiller, and that hot water just goes straight in the thing, and I wash everything up, basically. Everything on the hot side. Assemble it, air dry it, and every so often I'll give it a proper PBW clean, but other than that, it doesn't seem to do anything. And I've never had any problems, because obviously you boil everything the next time, and it's just been boiled, so that's fine. On the cold side, cleaning is pretty much what I was talking about with the PBW. So soon as the fermenter is empty, it gets like a full-on hot rinse in the shower with the shower head. I don't get it in the shower, that would be wrong. But switch the shower head around inside, get all the crap off it, use the microfiber as well, any non-abrasive, get all the yeast off. Then it gets a PW soak, about 5 liters, so that's 25 grams in like as hot water as you can. Give it another rinse around with the with a wash around with cloth, and then I kind of rotate it like over the next half hour, because there's no need to, I've discovered this, I mean, everyone does this, no need to fill the entire fermenter full of PBW or Starsen each time, just as long as it's coating the outside. So I kind of turn it a quarter every half an hour or something like that, to let it have a chance to eat away at the inside of the fermenter, because it releases oxygen as well, and it's closed, to open the spigot or the lid a little bit to let the oxygen out, because it's creating oxygen as well. Not a burst, but you know, once it's clean, gets a kind of double hot rinse once to get the stuff out, to get the residue out, and the second time to get the residue out, so it's pretty clean. And then I'll sanitize it straight away before putting it away. So sanitize it with either that day's iodophor or the RO water version of Starsan. Contact time a couple of minutes, make sure it's put the lid on, shake it all about, make sure it's covered on the inside, drain it back out into the bucket, and let it dry off. And then store it with, so in the bottom slide there, you can see there's basically just kitchen roll over the top to stop the bugs and the dust getting in. And it just sits there until next time. And then the when there's work due to go in it, then the very last thing that happens is it gets sanitized with an inch its life. And even when the wort is getting put into that big mouth on the fermenter, I put some kitchen roll around the top as well to stop the inevitable fruit flies and whatever walking around on the, you know what they're like. Turn your back, and there they are, the buggers. At this point, I was going to mention to say to Daz, how does your bucket blast work at this point? So you're cleaning out like fermenter buckets and
Yeah, so I've got a shower head attached to my sink in the garage. So it's kind of similar. I rinse things with cold water first, just to get all the big bits of crap out. And then in the bucket blaster, I fill it with Chem Clean as hot as I can get out of the tap, basically. So about 45, 50. And then just put it on the bucket blaster and leave it running for 10 minutes.
is Chem Clean the same as Starsan?
It's not Starsan, it's a PBW equivalent. It's a alkaline cleaner, but it tends to work at pretty low temperatures. I can't remember the exact, but I think it's like anything from 20 and above, all the way up to 60. It's pretty effective. But yeah, it's like you put about, I think it's 50 grams in 5 liters inside the bucket blaster, and it's pretty effective. The only thing I'd say about the Chem Clean is it foams up like crazy. So I'm trying to see if I can find something else that works a bit more effective in sort of the cleaning place systems, because after that 10 minutes, it's so foamy that it's stopping the pump work, basically. So about 10 minutes is the maximum cleaning time you get. Then you've got to like use the hot water tap to sort of dissipate all of the bubbles and so you can carry on. But if no one's seen the bucket blast before, essentially it's just a submersible pump in a bucket, and it's got 2 ball lock disconnects. So if you want to do kegs or like the pressure kit off of the Firmzilla, you just attach the ball locks to the disconnects, and it runs cleaner through the ball lock posts as well at the same time. So if you're doing kegs, it's super quick and easy. I can whack through about 6 kegs in an hour on that thing. And then once I've finished cleaning them with the Chem Clean, let them drain dry for a little while, and then once I've finished all the cleaning, I fill it with Starsan, and then just rinse and repeat. So whack them on with the Starsan, about 2 minutes per keg or Firmzilla, just let it recirculate, and then let it all drip dry after that.
And how long with the cleaning? Sorry, I missed that bit.
Oh, for the cleaning, it's about 10 minutes per
All right.
keg or for fermenter.
And the solution's strong enough to strip everything out.
Yeah, and it's the constant agitation as well. It's quite a powerful little pump on it. So it's really spraying it up inside it. Sometimes I've had to do it a bit longer or do a bit of manual wipe around with a cloth inside, but 9 times out of 10 it's completely clean after 10 minutes.
And is that after you've just emptied it? Or...
Yeah, just emptied it, gave it a quick rinse with some cold water, and then just shove it on the bucket blaster.
And does it? What if it's kind of dried on? I mean, like a good brewer, you don't leave it dried on.
Yeah, if it's dry, if it's dried on, you might have to do a couple of runs with a bit of manual cleaning in between. But yeah, I tend to do it straight after I'm finished. I can even shove my Brew Devil on top of it as well if I want to ever give that a blast inside.
Oh, okay.
But obviously it doesn't get up through the pipe work inside and all that. So it does. It just does a nice job of cleaning the inside of the vessel. Nothing about doing the pipe work or the sight glass.
Yeah, interesting. I might have a look at those. They're quite noisy.
Very. Yeah.
Sounds fun though. Quite like to look at it. You do so you could just like do that in the boat, set up in the bath, maybe?
Yeah, I've got a really deep catering sink in the garage, but definitely do it in the bath or inside something like that. I did it on the floor first couple of times, and that got messy.
Okay. All right.
In my experience, I think it's not the inside of the vessel that's the difficult thing to clean and sanitize. It's fairly straightforward. Where it is more difficult to clean and sanitize is taps and ball valves. I notice on those pictures there, you got taps at the bottom of the vessels. Did you take those off, take them apart, and clean them up and sanitize them? I've got a CIP system, and I've run hot caustic through that, thinking everything's clean. I've taken the ball valve apart, and there's still gunge and muck inside of there. So the likely source of infection is, as they're not likely to be inside of the vessel, but the taps and ball valves.
Funny you should say that, Paul. But when I started doing this, and I actually forgot to put that in my slides, but you're absolutely right. There aren't that many moving parts on those Speidel fermenters, but that tap does come apart, and I hadn't done that for a while, if ever, I think, until I was doing this or starting to do this presentation-y thing. And I took it apart, and you're right. There's the little groove where the thing spins. There was some kind of dark residue, and I smelled it. I was like, oh, I recognize that smell. That smells just like the off flavor in that porter that keeps happening. It's like, oh shit. And then it struck me that as you're opening and closing the spigot of a tap to take samples of it for the hydrometer or something like that, you're more than likely reintroducing back into the main body of work, and that might be introducing an infection from there. But does that sound like it would work its way back up the chain, as it were?
It could be. I mean, where is your beer once it's fermented? How do you get it from there into your cornicate? You run it through the tap.
Sometimes, in fact, for the porter, yes, it goes out the tap into the cornicate liquid down pipe. And I make a good point of cleaning and sanitizing everything apart from inside the tap, or had done. That's changed now. And the batch that's on now seems to be fine. But I was horrified to suddenly realize that I hadn't taken apart every single thing. And in a couple of slides time, I'll go through that with the kegs as well. I forgot to put that in about this one, but I made a point of breaking down every single piece of kit to their constituent parts, however long it took me to like wrench them apart, get all the little O-rings off, everything. And this was one of the things I did, and you're absolutely right, Paul, because there's a good spot and a good call. Yeah, and that's where then there was some gunge in there. I was mortified.
Yeah, I would agree. I've had the same problem. I've got an all-in-one system, the Grandfather S40, and same thing. You cool down your wort in the Grandfather and then take it out through the tap. And if you haven't taken the tap apart, the ball lock, and given it a good scrub beforehand, anything that's in there is going to infect it. I had it with a Philly sour, and because the Philly sour takes over 24 hours before it starts to work, because for the first 24 hours, all it's doing is converting it to a sour. It's got plenty of time for all the other microbes to get kicking in. So yeah, that is absolutely one of the key spots to be cleaning out, is taking apart your ball locks every time, which I now do without fail.
And if anyone is ever buying a ball valve, so I always recommend 2-piece or 3-piece. Always buy ones that you can take apart, dismantle completely, take the little seals out and the ball as well. That makes a big difference, because you do get a lot of gunge collecting in there. So even the 2-piece pieces come apart if you go to the right supplier.
And the butterflies are even like easier, aren't they? Completely open.
Great, excellent. Thank you for that. I'm going to whiz on to the next one, because there it is indeed. I thought I was pretty good at taking apart kegs. So I would take them completely apart, all the posts. The poppet worried me. And I mentioned this to a couple of people before. Some people on their corny cakes got those poppets that have got the 3 little legs on the inside of the post that you just can't get out. And it always worries me that there's a similar deal going on behind there as well. I haven't got a slide for it here, but I have got a video for it of me. I didn't get a chance to put it in the slideshow. There's a video of me with a pair of long nose pliers wrenching those things out like a bad dentist, because I ordered some universal poppets, which are the things on the bottom right of this slide. So that spring, and then above it, the little metal piece, and then the tiny O-ring. So they kind of come as one piece, and they just fall out of the posts now. So I bought a load of those, and I destroyed the inside of. I pulled out the poppets of the other posts and cleaned the posts off. And then they fit absolutely fine, and the disconnects fit absolutely fine. It's all good. But again, I wondered whether that could be harboring something, because the amount of times I take off the liquid post off a corny keg and pour something out the party tap, leave it on for like an hour, or leave it overnight or something like that, take it off, haven't cleaned it, haven't cleaned the what's that little red ring called? The O-ring. Is that an O-ring? On the
Post ring?
Post ring. Thank you. That'll do it. So I realized I hadn't been taking the post rings off either. And the ones I did take them off seemed to be quite clean on the inside. However, the object of this exercise was to break everything down to its constituent parts, down to the atoms, basically.
But if you can't break those posts down, and I've got some where the poppets have got those 3 little legs on them, you can't break them down. The other effective sanitizer you haven't mentioned, of course, is heat. So you could always boil those up in I don't know, 15 minutes in
Yes.
boiling water.
We were going to come to, I think Ian uses. Do you use an autoclave, Ian, or a pressure cooker?
It's just a pressure cooker. In fact, it's one of those Instapot kitchen pressure cookers, but it's a decent size, and yeah, I shove everything in there. So all the cold side stuff, I absolutely nail on brew day for about an hour in there. You know, all the tubing, all the butterfly valves. I even put my 2 and 3 piece valves in there. The plastic handles melted off immediately, but for me that was an acceptable outcome. So they got tossed. But yeah, everything cold side, I would try and I pressure cook because it's just, and in fact, then I just dump it in the Star San bucket, which is probably totally over the top. But I just think cold side, you probably can't be too careful.
I think that's a very wise thing to say. You just can't be too careful on the cold side, can you?
What's your process with that, Ian? Because I got one of those instant pots. Do you just like put some water in the bottom and then
I give it a good wash with PBW to get out the lamb stew or beef ragu or whatever we've been doing with it over the weekend. And in fact, I discourage my wife from using it as much as possible for cooking purposes. I've decided that it's now above cooking. And then, yeah, I put maybe, do you know what, you hardly need any water because it doesn't go anywhere really because you've got it sealed. I stick it on, I mean, I'm sure most of the settings would do it, but basically I choose a setting like soup and I pump the pressure up to max and I stick it on. I think James and I toed and froed on this, and there are a few sources of how many minutes to use at what pressure, and I think it worked out, do you know what, I can't even remember. So I just stick it on for an hour, which is, again, you know, over the top, but at max pressure. But to be honest, I stick it on first thing, start the brew day, and by the time the mash is, you know, what, halfway through, the alarm's already going off. So it's loads of time.
Okay. And that's enough heat. If you don't take, say, the O-rings off, the heat will penetrate the entire everything.
Yeah, very hot.
And do its job. Yeah. That's pressure and heat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Ian. So yeah, I eventually realized I needed to take every single little piece apart because I haven't got an Instapot yet, but I will. Because quite fancy a ragu. Anyway.
I will say I've never, although I break down my kegs every single time, I don't split off. I've got loads of non-removable poppets. I never split them off. I soak them all in PPW equivalent or whatever. I actually never heat treated those. I've never had an issue, but that's crikey, yeah.
I think sometimes the problem with the poppets that you can't take apart is when you actually get bits of hot matter up there. It's sometimes I've noticed that it's more the actual debris rather than the sanitizing them sometimes.
Yeah, I've had hops get up in those things as well.
I mean, I think AliExpress or something do the whole posts as, you know, the whole post for next to nothing anyway. So I think I put my original ones, the original corny ones, in a collection to one side.
One trick if you do think there's something in there is I click a disconnect onto the top of the post and then shove it into soak so it's forced open. If you're suspicious.
Yeah, and you can blast liquid the other way. Yeah, that way, yeah.
Of course. That's a good trick. Thanks. Just going to write that down. Although I haven't got any of those anymore. Or I have, I've got loads.
Yeah, the other thing you could do with that, Steve, with a corny, is if you put your solution of hot PBW in a corny, say it's half full, you then close it up, and because there's heat in it, it builds up the pressure. Then you put your quick disconnect on the outposts, and you blast the hot PBW through the disconnects.
Oh yeah, over the fence to the neighbours.
And similarly with the sanitizer, if you're filling it completely with sanitizer in order to discharge everything and get rid of all the air, you just blast the sanitizer out with CO2 and you've got a perfectly clean post.
I think that's worth mentioning actually, that because I do that I turned the quarter filled keg when I got sanitizer in it upside down, and I've got a little post pusher rather than putting a disconnect on it, which just fits into the post and pushes the post in the actual pin in, and then so that you're always letting some liquid out through the post, because just filling the keg with the sanitizer and sloshing it round, it's worth actually running some out through the posts and the PRV, the pressure release valve.
A chopstick is good for that.
Yeah.
Or a screwdriver.
I found that the posts that support trays, for paper trays, when you've got stacking paper trays, the little posts that support those are ideal, just the right diameter.
But don't do it whilst the keg's upright, out the liquid post, because I have done it. Particularly stupid.
I did it once with the beer in there as well, and that makes quite a nice design on the ceiling.
I've not had spots ever since. My complexion has been excellent. I can't see a thing though.
Those are great. Thank you for those. Yeah. Generally, I do break the whole keg apart and the O-rings off the dip tubes and everything, but I hadn't really taken the posts apart. And because I didn't, kind of back to the original problem, I didn't know where this stupid off flavor was coming from. I'm kind of taking everything apart, really. But yeah, I don't have any pressure cooker things, so thanks for adding those in. I'll try those, but also good for the presentation. So yeah, just I sanitize the inside of the keg, put it back together, clamp it all back together, shake it around so that everything on the inside and the outside has got a coating, and let it air dry and all of that. Other cleaners and sanitizers. So we're getting slightly towards the end, I think. This is part of the bit I was going to hand over to Les, if Les is still here. I've got your video lined up, Les. And then there's one from Ian, who's going to talk about a little bit about purple line cleaner, which I've not used, I'm not familiar with, but it looks very useful. And then a couple of controversial slides towards the end, one bleach, one DIY PBW. But we'll is Les there? Is Les
yes, I'm here.
If I flick to my next slide, and then I'll set it off when you explain
my cue.
What's going on. You're cued.
Okay.
You're on.
I guess that like most people, when I first started brewing, I started with kits, and I bought a starter kit, and that starter kit came with sodium percarbonate, which has done a good job for me as a cleaner. And over time, I moved on from just brewing kits in buckets to all grain, and bought pumps and all this kind of stuff, corny kegs and so on. And I was still using sodium percarbonate, and it was still doing, to my mind, a good job. And this is where perhaps you shouldn't trust your eyes, because I've came to a point where, hold it, wait. I came to a point where my pump that I was using to recirculate the worts for cooling mostly stopped working. It seized up. And my cleaning regime up until that point had been that I just circulated hot water through hoses, pump, plate chiller, and circulated it for a while. Then I would do the same thing with some sodium percarbonate, circulate for a little while, then leave it to soak for a while, circulate again, and then just flush it all through with some water. And to my mind, that had done a good job, because what was coming out was clean, clear water. So the video you're about to see is one that it's the first time I used sodium hydroxide caustic for cleaning, because when I stripped down my seized up pump, I found that actually it wasn't clean at all. It was quite grimy in there, and it rather upset me. So I decided I was going to give all of my kit that you can't see inside a caustic wash. And this is my platula. It's already been cleaned. It's already had a good soak in sodium bicarbonate and a good flush. It's been back flushed. The water comes out nice and clear. Now, in these two pots that you can see, the top one is the caustic soda solution. The bottom one is the water coming out of my clean platula. So you can now play the video, Steve. So that's my clean platula being flushed with sodium hydroxide.
It's filthy.
Not so clean. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
So I do use sodium hydroxide quite a lot now as a cleaning agent. But Steve asked me, how do you find using it? And I said, actually, it's quite scary because it is dangerous stuff. If you ever use sodium hydroxide and you don't use gloves, you'll find that your hands feel quite kind of slippery and soapy. And there's a good reason for that. Sodium hydroxide is used to make soap from fat and oil. That's how you make soap. You take fat or oil, you subject it to a very strong alkali like sodium hydroxide, and you then get soap. And that soapy feel that you get on your skin is actually the sodium hydroxide taking the oils in your skin and converting them into soap. And if you don't clean it off very quickly, you'll find little holes starting to appear in your skin, and it gets very tender. So it is dangerous stuff. You need to use gloves. You need to have eye protection. You need to use it in a ventilated space, because you'll feel it burning your throat if you breathe the vapors. So don't mess with this stuff without giving it some fairly serious respect, actually. But it is a really good cleaner. So I wanted to introduce it as, firstly, a potential solution to stuff that's very dirty and grimy. Partly just to raise the issue of don't necessarily trust your eyes. If things are looking clean, doesn't necessarily mean they are. I'm not sure if it was Ian was mentioning about ball valves, but ball valves are also an area where the little void area around the ball is where you get lots of grime, and you can't see it unless you can strip your ball valves down. Pumps, strip those down, give them a soak as well. Even the taps actually on your dispense system, they need to be cleaned out every so often, given a good soak in caustic or some decent cleaner. So that's kind of my contribution, I guess, to this cleaning stuff, talking about caustic and just making you aware of some of the dangers of it. If you want to use it, I get mine. I've got actually a container here. This is what I use. It's a 1 kilo bottle of, you can hear it rattling, it's dried stuff, which I get from a company that's actually for making soap. What was it called now? The Soap Kitchen. It's from the Soap Kitchen. For 1 kilo, it's about £5, but it's £9 delivery. So buy 2 or 3, because it's hazardous delivery charges. And I use 50 to 80 grams of that powder in a litre of water, and that's fairly safe.
Could I just say on that one, be very careful. You're adding the powder to the water.
Yes.
Sodium hydroxide has a massive exothermic reaction when you make it up. So if you are going to make it up, do not, whatever you do, add the water to the powder, or the crystals rather, always crystals, and do it gradually. You mix a bit and it'll warm up, and then you mix a bit more and mix a bit more, because it will get particularly hot as you're mixing it.
It does, yes. If you use 80 grams in a litre of water, it will take cold water to almost too hot to handle within seconds. Yeah, it is very exothermic.
And be particularly careful with your eyes. because there are tiny spots of that in your eyes. I mean, I'd say over the hands, make sure you've absolutely got face protection.
Yeah, eye protection, certainly, gloves, use it in a ventilated area, keep your skin covered, so don't leave skin exposed if you can avoid it. And definitely don't spill it on you. So take all your precautions. I did make one stupid mistake. I did put some strong sodium hydroxide in a fizzy drinks bottle, and I tried to pump it through my glycol chiller to clean out any gunk that was in the product coils. And what I didn't realize is that although sodium hydroxide is fine in some plastics, it's not in others. And the plastic used in fizzy drinks bottles it is digested by the sodium hydroxide. So what happened was that the bottle developed pinholes like it does in your skin, and it sprayed sodium hydroxide throughout the inside of my brew shed from wall to wall, ceiling to floor. Fortunately, I had stepped out just before that. Otherwise, I would have been injured by that. I've never done that since, of course, and I've learned a valuable lesson there, luckily, without too much injury. But it did burn all the varnish in my brew shed. I covered the inside of my brew shed is covered in ply, which has all been varnished with marine varnish, and all of it is burned by the caustic. So don't do that, boys and girls.
Like you, Les, I do use PBW for general day-to-day cleaning, but I also do use sodium hydroxide for deep cleaning, and I use a product from Murphy's. It's called Antiformin S, so it's got a bit of sodium hydroxide, whatever bleaches, as an additive in there. It gives it an extra cutting power. It's really, really effective. But all those precautions you just talked about, absolutely right. We used to use it at Western quite a lot, and absolutely right to have all your protections. But it is a very, very effective cleaner, as you just demonstrated in your video. Also interesting to see your hoses there with the quick disconnects, which I have got, so that the hoses are clamped over the hose tail. I would also take those apart regularly and clean, because you will get stuff down in between the hose and the hose tail as well. So yeah, if it comes apart, do it.
Yeah, I take all of that apart. I also take the disconnects apart as far as you can and take the rubber seals out and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do that, and I replace the hoses quite often. I was saying at the beginning of the session today, actually, that the hoses do discolor, those silicone hoses, and I do feel the need to just replace them every 6 months or so. I don't like the dirty, grubby hoses, and I do give them more good caustic wash all the connections.
Just like Paul, I've also used caustic only as deep cleaning. But what I've found, I've got quite a few glass fermenters, and I use them for souring beers. I think a lot of people know that. I find if you've got a Brett infection, it can literally be a little bit stuck on the inside of a glass fermenter. You can't get in there with any brush or anything. And I found PBW is just not enough. Some warm water and PBW and caustic, and I leave it in very warm water and leave it overnight, and it literally dissolves everything. I rinse that out with warm water again, and it seems to be okay. And that's, in my mind, the only thing that will kill Brett in a glass fermenter is caustic. And
I think caustic will dissolve anything organic, including you, of course. So
I've also had the exothermic thing of throwing it into the water, and the glass didn't crack, but it sort of screamed. It made the screeching sound, which is quite an experience and scary, but it was okay in the end. Yeah.
The glass screamed at you?
The whole fermenter, as I poured just granules into warm water in the thing, and it's like the whole thing what's the word? Reverberated a sound.
Resonated.
Reverberated.
Yeah, that's probably the water in the immediate vicinity of the crystals boiling.
Yeah,
it's acting like a big sound box.
Right.
And you just think, oh, I could have died there. I don't know.
Steve,
So
I'm happy to pass back to you now because that was, I think, probably all that I needed to say, unless anyone's got any questions, and I can ask general questions.
Is it safe on stainless steel, or is it something which you should minimise contact time?
Oh, it's so totally safe on stainless caustic. I mean, it's what all the breweries use. I mean, it's it is. That's why we're talking about it. It is the best cleaner for breweries. It's just it has its problems. It's probably like lead in paint or whatever,
Yeah, definitely is the only thing I'll use to clean my plate chiller, and it's pretty much the only time I'll use it, because I mean even then I found when I go to use the plate chiller next time, when I flush it through, I still find bits of hot material and stuff coming out of it, even though I've previously flushed it with with caustic. So that just goes to show what can get inside a plate chiller.
I think as well, equally, if you don't feel comfortable like me using that level of chemical, you just make brewing choices that don't require it. So I've never bothered going near a plate chiller because I just don't want to be handling that kind of stuff. I am incompetent enough as it is with all the other risks in the brewery that I don't need one that will surefire leave me maimed and.
That's the voice of sanity.
That is a good point. With the plate chiller, if you're using a plate chiller, then you're using commercial brewery type equipment, in which case perhaps should be thinking about using commercial brewery type cleaners. But I mean, I think avoid the stuff that's tricky to clean.
Caustic's good, just treat it with respect.
Everything that we use has its dangers. How often do we use phosphoric acid or all of the acids that we use? They can be just as dangerous if they get to the wrong places.
Yeah, I mean, people use sulfuric acid in dropping pH, phosphoric acid. That's nasty stuff at 80% or whatever.
Even boiling wort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
true.
I think when you start putting this stuff under pressure and heat and recycling it with pumps, then I've always found that ramps up the risk of pipes blowing, things, all sorts of things happening there versus just pipetting an acid into a for me that's another level of risk.
I think when talking about this, the idea of putting it in a plastic drinks bottle and then discovering, I mean, I discovered, not in the same way, but I discovered that plastic drinks bottles don't hold caustic very well in a similar way where it just leaked. But
I'd probably end up drinking from it.
Has labels.
What's caustic actually doing that lesser cleaners aren't doing to strip all of that stuff out, like in lead and leases?
I'm guessing the sodium hydroxide is breaking down the fats and which surround the cells. So you've got a lipid cell membrane, which is basically fatty. To stop water going into it, you want something that's water repellent, so the outside of the cell. So caustic is going to break down the cell membrane. So as far as I know, it destroys the cell's wall, and therefore all the zaps it that way.
Yeah, it's a bit like washing up liquid. When you put that on the water, it breaks the surface tension. Yeah. And you can also get rid of ants with soapy water as well, because they don't like it. They've got an exoskeleton that's kind of depends on those fatty bonds. So ants don't like soapy water. Squirt of washing up liquid in your watering can. Get rid of the ants in your pots.
Does it work for snails?
Snails, not some. I don't know snails. It might.
It works. It works for
like
aphids. It must work for aphids in a similar way because people spray roses, to remove aphids with soapy water.
That's soapy water, not caustic. Don't spray caustic on your roses.
I was going to run your video one more time.
Wow.
Yeah, it's awful.
That's quite eye-opening.
Nice mild there.
Nice head retention. All right. From one quite dangerous chemical to potentially less so, I think. I've not used purple line cleaner. I haven't got like a kegerator or loads of things permanently lined up. But Ian does, I can see in his other picture. And what's purple line cleaner doing?
Well, so it's the stuff that pubs and so on use for cleaning out their lines. Do you know what? I don't actually even know what's in it, but it is the commercial solution for all pubs and stuff cleaning out lines. It's supposed to, it goes in purple and then, sorry, it goes in purple and then in dirty pipes it starts coming out green or sort of discolored and dishwater, and then when it runs purple again, you know it's clean, and you leave it in there for I think it's 10 minutes or so. And I mean, I think lots of folk use it. Sort of my take on that and Starsan, in fact, has always been how can I use it most easily. So I started off with squeezy pot bottles and the carbonation caps, and I'd be squirting it through lines or squirting it through taps, because I've got, well, like everyone else, I've got loads of these kind of setups. I've got loads of, you know, so, well, not loads, but a few jumper cables that I'm always using to transfer beer. And then obviously you've got your tap lines. And I can't remember where I saw it, but someone recommended using these things, which are the Spear & Jackson 2-litre garden spray bottles. And the really cool thing is, well, one of the really cool thing is, when you remove the nozzle that comes with it, you can directly screw on a liquid disconnect, you know, a post, corny keg post, together with, I think you need to put an O-ring behind it, which I think is like, I think I've just stuck on one of the post rings as well, but it just screws on, and hey presto, you've got yourself a pressurized line cleaner, which with a few, you know, pushes of a handle, suddenly you can connect it up to anything, and it takes just, I mean, it takes seconds just to squirt a bit through, and then I'll take it off, and then I've got one. It's a twin brother filled with Starsan, and I'll flush it out with Starsan, and job done. And it's the fastest way that I've found to clean any of those lines where you've got disconnects on. Yeah, just super fast for that. And on the where you've got multiple lines as well in the kegerator. The other neat thing I worked out, this is all based on laziness, I think, which together with incompetence seem to be my two key attributes as a brewer. So
efficiency, I think, might be the word you're on.
Efficiency, that's it, efficiency, absolutely. So these little things will connect two liquid posts together. And so you can put them in between two liquid posts, so that if I've got 5 taps running, instead of cleaning each tap separately, what I'll do is I will squirt line cleaner in one tap, you know, in tap number 1, and then each of the taps I'll then just use some of that hose. It looks like the stuff that Les is using, some of the thick silicone hose. I'll just push onto the taps to connect the taps together. And the discos at the back, I use a jumper for each one, and you can basically daisy chain and push line cleaner through the whole set of 5 taps and squirt it out the other end. Either with, I used to use a pump, but I just got a bit bored of that. It was just too, you know, it just seemed over-engineered. So now I just use one of these things, and I'll squirt 2 litres through the lot and leave it in there for 10 minutes, and then push Starsan through the lot, and you can clean 5 lines. Well, I guess virtually in the space of time it would normally take you to do 1. And I think, again, it's an AliExpress. I think they're almost a £1 a piece or something. The jumpers, they're ever so cheap.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
what's the name of the bottle again?
What's in it?
No, what the name of the bottle? Or
These are Spear & Jackson ones, which, I mean, I think you could probably get no name ones, but the reason why these were recommended strongly to me in the first place was that the nozzle that comes with them, I need to be careful what I do here, I'm about to do something stupid. Let me depressurize one of them. The nozzle nozzle that comes with them, you can simply, like I say, screw a post onto them, and then anything with a post, you can simply clip onto it. So whether it's a length of pipe or a tap, or and I was always, with these things trying to, get the old pop bottle or whatever. It was just, I just got a bit tired. Whereas now you can do it in seconds.
Using the jumpers is a brilliant idea.
That's
That's like another brand as well that them coming through always. I've got off Amazon, which is exactly the same size as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. If there's other brands, then perfect. Yeah, like I said, I only chose that for safety, just because you know what these things are like. They all have slightly different fits. But equally, having said that, a lot of them share all the same stuff. But and
if you've got the intertaps, you can get a screw-in wall post as well. So you don't have to use the push on of the hose.
Yeah.
You use the disconnects then.
Yeah, it's pretty low. I suppose I found those hoses, they seem like they're going to pop off, but they never do, and it's all relatively low pressure, and the stuff that you've got in them isn't horrible.
I don't know what's in the purple, but I've understood that line cleaner is caustic. I mean, it's sodium hydroxide and possibly potassium hydroxide mixed with some sort of I don't know, descalant or something. I've always, because I worked in a pub and we were ever so careful about getting line cleaner rinsed out of lines for fear of. In fact, there were some poisonings not that long ago. Somewhere got done up in Manchester. I can't remember where a bar. They went for I think it was some cocktail or whatever, or it was after salt for tequila. Someone went to the back of the pub and got what they thought was salt, and it was sodium hydroxide.
Ouch. Undiluted purple line cleaner is very strong. I've spilt it on me bar top and it took the varnish off.
It is sodium hydroxide. I mean, mostly sodium hydroxide. I mean, as I say, the reason it's purple is that you can see when it's done its job, when it's not purple, so you're not serving purple drink to customers.
I was going to ask that about both the purple line cleaner and the caustic, about kind of disposing of it after you've used it as well in a domestic setting. Is that, do you need to dilute it a lot, or do you just fling
No,
it
I'd probably use it as a drain cleaner. I mean, that's if you go and buy drain cleaner, that's sodium hydroxide. Powerful drain cleaners to remove, grease and fats and so on. In restaurants and catering and so on, it's again sodium hydroxide.
Okay, so it's all the same.
I'd probably allow it to drain gradually through my sewage system or whatever, so that it cleans it.
Yeah. Well,
it's not that strong. It is diluted, I think, about 30-1 actually. So it's not that strong. But
yeah, but I mean, it's not going to do your drains any harm. I mean, not at the amount we're using.
With my drains cleaning out, that's another story. But okay, no, that's useful. I'm liking purple cleaner.
I just Googled it, and it says it's a mixture of sodium hydroxide and sodium hypochlorite.
Hypochlorite.
Yeah,
Bleach.
Yeah, you see,
Bleach.
Yeah.
Sodium hypochlorite's basically bleach.
Right.
Alrighty.
So I'd probably avoid putting that through near stainless steel. Is it stainless? You've got to be careful with bleaches on.
Yes, because it'll pit it.
All metals, but it's only a weak solution. You're fine. You've not got a long contact time, and it's quite weak.
Yeah. I mean, what they talk about line clean, they talk about 20 minutes or something.
Not even that. I don't think it's 10 minutes. It's quick.
Right.
And sometimes once I've emptied the line cleaner bottle into it, I'll then just pump it up and I'll use it to flush it with air first, so that I know that the Star San is simply following pretty much an empty track. like you say, to avoid, well, just to try and make doubly sure that it's all gone.
I mean, the Star San's going to neutralize any bleach. Well, you're bleaching the alkali. It's going to neutralize any of the alkali anyway. You know, you're putting basically an acid through after, well, something slightly acidic after something that's alkali. So you're likely to do a little bit of neutralization.
There's no danger there though of mixing the bleach part of purple line cleaner with an acid following it, is there?
Well, now they just neutralize each other.
But
they are very weak.
It's all
They're very
very
weak
small
anyway.
amounts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Just residue rather than
neat.
Yeah.
Yes, because we're coming onto that slide shortly.
The residue slide, hurrah!
The residue slide, the bleach and mixed with acid slide we're coming up to in a minute. The controversial one. Thank you very much. I'm gonna nip to the next slide. There's only a couple left, I think. I've mixed one out. Ian sent me this, and I had there's a discussion with Lee as well about making your own PBW. Ian, I think you looked at this recipe a long time ago. So I used it recently. Again, in a well-ventilated garden with all the gear on, and mixed inside a Ziploc bag, as you suggested, because when I first bought all of this stuff, I was going to say the reason I even bothered doing this in the first place was, one, just to find out, but two, because it's cheaper than PBW, and it's flipping sold out everywhere. PBW, as is Star San half the time these days. Anyway, so seems to be quite a lot cheaper to get it from online chemists who sell powders. And it's a shame Lee's not here because he mixes powders for a living, doesn't he? He's a pharmacist, of course. The pharmacist, I hasten to clarify with. But I took the tip from Ian to make this up. I bought the containers maybe about 6 months ago, and I might have mentioned this to you, Ian, that I took the lid off the one of them. It might have been the surfactant, and breathed in some of the dust, and absolutely terrified me because I felt it do this terrible thing into my chest. And I'm like, oh, in my nose, and I was like, oh God, I've poisoned myself or something like that. So I basically glued the lid back down and left it and did some more reading. But I did make it up I did make up a batch. So I bought some sodium bicarbonate, which is readily available. One of the other reasons I wanted to make it up as well, because I've been using sodium bicarbonate on its own and it leaves that residue, because the other chemicals that are in PBW help wash it away, basically. I think like the surfactant helps rinse all of that stuff away, dilute it and rinse it all away afterwards. So I wanted to do it for that reason, partly because my stuff had a load of white residue all over it, and no one wants that. So I mixed this in the garden in double Ziplocked bags, scrunched it all up, and I used a method that I think I got from Lee, which he said to mix up the very small elements first, so like the 30 grams and the 75 grams. So mix them thoroughly, and then put like 30 and 75 grams of the other, the sodium bicarbonate and metasilicate in it. I wrote down the method, so I haven't put it on this slide, partly because I've only done it once and I didn't want to put it out there as the definitive way of doing anything, to be honest. But it worked. And it looks like it's not working. I hadn't used PBW official for a long time, and it's worked really well and really fast as well. Much better than sodium bicarbonate on its own. And from my point of view, quite a bit safer than caustic because I'm scared of that kind of thing. So this seemed to work quite well anyway. The printout in the bottom there is the US patent for the mix. And I'll, as with all of the other things in this, I'll do a references slide at the end, and I'll put a load of links in and all that shizzle to the recipe for this, to the patent, just if you're interested in, plus all the other stuff. Anyway, that was a slide that also required taking a bit of care with chemicals, is essentially what that slide was all about. And talking of which, I think probably the penultimate slide, because time is knocking on a bit. Oh no, that was just some of the ingredients, what they do, which I should have taken out. Sodium lauryl sulfate was the thing I breathed in. Charming substance.
You're not in a cheese shop, Steve.
Say what?
You're not in a cheese shop or the butcher's. You're not supposed to. Oh, this is good stuff.
Smells delicious.
Does it actually really save you that much, Steve?
You're quite right. I did some of the maths, and it wasn't that much in the end. In the scale that I bought it, so those little tubs, it probably works out about the same. I think you have to be doing it industrially and then splitting it up between 40 people in a homebrew group to make it worth doing. Yeah, so there is the chance I might just go and buy the real thing. I'm going to do some more maths. It was probably not worth it in the end. I realized that when I was doing it. Saving myself 50p in the garden here. You're quite right. Yeah. But it's good stuff, and much better than sodium bicarbonate on its own, I found. Okay, bleach, super controversial. One, because bleach is such an old school cleaner and sanitizer for home brewers anyway, but also because latterly there's this idea that you can acidify the bleach and make it much more effective. So as always, when anyone ever mentions bleach and an acid together, big red letters, never, and I'm saying it properly seriously, never mix bleach neat with an acid or any other chemical, unless you know what you're doing, but never mix bleach with an acid, because it will release chlorine gas and it will kill you. So that's that. Or it can kill you. The version that I've got, the reason I picked this up, I wanted to try it out. And also the reason there are no measurements on here, and I don't want to talk about it too much, is because I haven't really nailed the recipe, if you like, and I want to check it out with like several other people before I start putting this out. And if possible, we'll probably edit this out of the video anyway, because it's just feels like an unsafe thing to put out there when it's not checked. But I just wanted to talk about it, really. So that was it. There was so anyone listen to that brewing podcast? James, what was his name? The two laughing American boys, old men they are now. It's a brilliant podcast they do, Brewing Radio. It's really nice. A really old, they did 2 episodes in 2007, like next door to each other. One was talking to the guy who ran a iodophor iodine sanitizer company, and talked about that for an hour. Super fascinating, really useful. The other one was this one. So the guy that invented Starsan, Charlie Talley, who worked in the chemical industry before he started there, because he realized that he could make this Starsan that would work for homebrewers. The presenter was talking to him about ostensibly Starsan, but he spent the first half an hour talking about how bleach was a much better sanitizer and used at the right dilution. It was rinse free, trouble free. There's no off flavors, there's no danger to it or anything like that. So there was a certain amount of bleach, a small amount of bleach into a large amount of water, stir it thoroughly, and then some vinegar or an acid goes in there, similarly small amount into the water, and then you mix them together. And separately, I've got that backs that up is, and I'll put a link to this when maybe in the last slide. American Society for Microbiology study measured all of this exactly. So they're properly diluted bleach at an alkaline level. They discovered as a relatively poor disinfectant, killed 2.5% of their drug bacterial spores after 20 minutes. Acidified down to pH 6 killed everything. And it made quite a huge difference. I'll put a link to the paper, which is really interesting. But I didn't put, again, I put no details on here about how to mix the thing other than do it in that particular order. There's no measurements there because I want to really go and check out whether this is, get the measurements right before mentioning it out really loud to anybody, because it's a deadly mix. No one wants to be responsible for that. So that was that. But it's a legit no rinse sanitizer, apparently, particularly if you acidify the dilute bleach. It will kill anything and everything. So whether that makes it safer than some of the others that we've talked about or not is something to be investigated and to report back later, to be honest. But has anyone got any experience of bleach? Obviously there's the chlorophenols issue, but I think this is so dilute that apparently doesn't come into it. Anyone have any bleaching experience?
Didn't man bottle some of his wine or beer in a bleach bottle as a so you can do this sort of thing?
Yes, I think he did, yeah. I will just say that the bleach to use for this is thin bleach, not the bleach you put down the loo, because that clings to everything. You need this thin bleach, which you can't seem to get many places. Asda sells it. It's like 85p for 2 litres or something like that, so it's super cheap.
I seem to remember James saying that the thick bleach ends up sticking to the plastic inside the bottle, and yeast actually will bring that into its cell walls and create, I can't remember, but create some sort of chemical which is extremely bad for you. It won't kill you, but it's probably close to poison. So fermenting in a bleach bottle is probably the worst thing you could do from a homebrewer perspective.
But I just say, of course, the bleach, you can't be using this on stainless, can you? So
that's right. Yes, sorry. Yeah, that's.
I mean, this is an absolute no anywhere near stainless.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes, it's just not metal, not any stainless at all. Thanks.
And is it much better than iodophor to merit its use? I mean, and merit the.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to kill everything. I think I'm not sure how.
Including the brewer.
Well, quite. Well, God. I didn't get as far as a big list of iodophor versus acidified bleach. Just sounds wrong, doesn't it? But it works apparently, and is a no rinse sanitizer. Cheap, but I think, and I kind of said at the beginning, I think after investigating lots of these things, and answering Paul's question a couple of seconds ago as well, I think a lot of the 5-star chemical people, and this is not sponsored, produce stuff specifically for home brewers that is specifically formulated. So PBW does do all of those things. We've kind of gone around the houses and tried to find alternatives for slightly more dangerous ones, or even though they're more effective. And same with sanitizers. They're very specifically aimed at safe home brewers, or, you know, enthusiastic semi-pros or professionals even. And I think I've ended up coming back and whirling back to the safe versions of things and using them properly, which potentially I took my eye off the ball about previously. But I think professionals use them as well. I used a quote from someone earlier from a video series from the craft brewing people. There's a big interview with him, and he's quite interesting. He's quite funny. And at the end, he says in his commercial brewery, he just uses PBW because it works and it's a lot cheaper than, safer than caustic, for instance, or anything else, and he can dispose of it more easily. All of those things. So it seems lots of people use those standard cleaning and sanitizing products. And I think as long as you do everything else right as well, then, again, speaking to myself, pay more attention to your cleaning and sanitizing regime. But thank you, everybody, for listening to my rambling, and thank you for everybody else chipping in, Daz and Ian and Les, as particularly, for doing their bit from their place, and everyone's questions. And this is either over, or I'm going to throw it open and we can keep going, but I'm going to stop showing the bleach.
I just had a thought there, Steve. Just thinking about the bleach, going back to the bleach thing which you've just removed.
Yeah.
When you
come back,
okay,
liquid does contain.
Oi, I don't want to hear about your motorbike. The study which refers to, yeah, there it is, that refers to like diluted bleach at pH 11 is basically rubbish. When you think about it, I mean, what's the pH of your tap water? The pH of your tap water is less than 8, right? Mine's about 7.6. So you don't actually have to acidify the bleach that much to get it to pH 6, do you? So the amount of acid that you would have to put in is quite small. It's just something that occurred to me. I mean, why they come up with this figure of pH 11? Maybe just because it's like so completely alkaline. But yeah, most tap water is slightly acidic. It's certainly in this country anyway.
Yeah. So I did this earlier. I did this afternoon, in fact. So I measured the pH of the thin bleach and of the vinegar and of my water, and then of the mixes. So the bleach was somewhat like 13 pH. My water was 7.2, 7.3, something like that. And when I mixed them, it became, off the top of my head, it's written in the kitchen. Off the top of my head, it was something like 8.5 pH, so mixed bleach.
Okay.
The recipe I used, which is why I've not put it on here, said to get to 80 parts per million, you use this amount of bleach, this amount of white vinegar, and this amount of water. So I went with that, equal parts essentially of bleach and vinegar in the water, diluted in the correct order. Just going to keep saying it.
Yes.
And the warning that I've got on the bottom left there says, I saw in a couple of places, keep the pH below 6, otherwise risk of chlorine gas starts to get released. So you're absolutely right, Ken, because when I added the same amount of vinegar to my diluted bleach. The pH was something like 4.5. So I stood back quite a lot and opened the windows quite a lot, tried not to breathe in.
Yeah.
And then I immediately diluted it because it was in the sink. So I just kept diluting it with the pH meter in it until it hit 6 before I went anywhere near it or breathed in again. But you're absolutely right. And that is one of the reasons I didn't kind of continue with this slide, because there are too many different dilutions of bleach, different manufacturers' dilutions of bleach in any case, too many different pHs of vinegar or any other acid. People's water is a little bit different. So I wanted to kind of go away and find if there was even a safe way of doing this in the first place, or whether it was one of those just because you can, should you kind of things. Just leave it alone, you know, in which case this slide might never have appeared, or it would have appeared as a slide that says, by the way, you know that bleach and acid thing? Don't go anywhere near that shit. That's
Well, I mean, it's no secret, is it? I mean, home brewers have been using this technique for years and years and years. Trying to hide it is not much point. It's a worthy discussion point, and I think it can be done completely safely. Particularly if you to like handling any chemicals, if you're careful, particularly this, you do it outside, you're not really going to run into many problems.
I think that's the problem, though, isn't it? If you do it right. I think the stuff that we get for homebrew use is generally safe stuff, because the people that make it have to assume that we have less than the requisite amount of common sense. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we really do have less than the requisite common sense.
It's actually quite difficult to get hold of some of these chemicals now.
Yeah.
I mean, things like phosphoric acid, because of the law that they changed end of last year on certain chemicals being classified as potentially bomb-making or drug-making chemicals. It's actually quite difficult to get hold of some of them now. 85% or well over 8. So I think over 30% phosphoric. You need an address that they will check up on and so on.
Yes, you need to be licensed. I had that recently.
Things like, I mean, even things like sort of bleaching agents and so on over certain strengths and volumes.
Sorry.
You're restricted on them. So it's actually, you know, nowadays it's actually quite difficult to get hold of some of these things anyway.
Yes, I bought some hydrochloric acid recently, and because I was doing some work in the garden with cement, and I needed to clean some cement up, and I wanted to buy some 30% hydrochloric acid, and they wanted to see all my licenses and see my company registration and so on. So I had to go back to 10%, which did the job. But I remember as a kid, I used to go and buy this stuff because I was really into all kinds of stuff, making fireworks and gunpowder and all kinds of stuff. And I used to go to the chemist, the local chemist, to buy bottles of strong acid.
Oh yeah, you go down to Boots the chemist to buy your acid, which of course used to be used for batteries and so on. So yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, you can just get your caustic in a corn shop.
Yeah.
Best place to get it, in fact.
Oh yeah. Well, I used to clean motorbike exhaust pipes out with sodium hydroxide. You see, you'd use to clean all the carbon out of an exhaust pipe. But I wouldn't dream of doing it now, knowing sort of what I know. But
risking the fuzz knocking on the door at 4 a.m.
I think this is where you're more tempted to take the bigger risks as you get more frustrated with not being able to clean up an infection or something.
Oh, well, this is a question I've got. Beer stone. We haven't mentioned beer stone, and I've had problems with that before. Getting rid of that. Is it calcium oxalate or something?
Yes.
Has anyone had problems with that?
Yeah.
I might have had some in my beer line before, but not in the kegs.
I've I've had it in a couple of kegs. I mean, if you can get your hand into a keg, then I actually genuinely believe that the fingertips are probably the best way of finding out whether a keg is clean or not. And I found a sort of hardish deposit sometimes, and I found it in the fermenter. I was going to say as well, I found some around the Thermo well. So taking a fermenter apart, it's all very well taking your ball valves and so on apart, but things like the Thermo well, where that bolts on and has a couple of washers, that can be a place where nasties can hide up. So when talking about a strip down of the kit, it really is, you know, if he's going to do it properly, a complete strip down occasionally.
Yes, yes, it is. Actually, I have had beer stone in one of my kegs. It was only a very fine ring. I think it was a beer that I hadn't actually put on tap for a long time. I can't remember why, but I had a very fine ring, and actually I did clear that with Star San. I just put quite a strong solution of Star San in, inverted the keg, and I just left it for a week, and it did actually take it off.
I came across.
So I found that quite difficult to remove. I mean, talking about nasties, I mean, I used 2 molar nitric on it and left that to soak, and which nitric's meant to be good for organics, and it's the actual that hardish sort of it's almost pinky color, pinky grey color deposit.
I had a presentation from a brewery that I used a couple of things from, but not the beer stone thing. And I remember that they mentioned that in there, and they mentioned exactly nitric and phosphoric as being good at removing beer stone, but caustic sets it, apparently. I'm not sure what it means by setting it. It means you'll never get rid of it. But yeah, phosphoric and nitric remove beer stone well, and they have a good kill spectrum, which is a charming expression.
Got another one here. Calcium hydroxide. I use it as an extreme alkaline when I make candy sugar, because it's actually it doesn't create any gas when reacting with water, but you struggle to dilute it, but it's extremely alkaline. Even when you use it, the powder can even, you know, sort of foam up and burn your eyes just like that. It's illegal to buy this in the US, but apparently in the UK you can.
I'm surprised
sparingly.
I'm surprised you could buy calcium hydroxide, right?
Yeah.
The reactivity, you've got your sodium hydroxide, your potassium hydroxide, and your calcium hydroxide. And calcium's
on alkaline wise, it's about 4 times stronger than caustic. But you struggle to dilute it a bit and so on, and it's a bit dangerous. But yeah, I got some. It's lasted me 3 years already, and it's only in extreme cases.
I've used phosphoric acid to.
I don't know where this is going. We're all talking about where do we buy our acid.
I've used phosphoric acid to acidify sparge water, and sometimes I've noticed that when I make it up the night before and put it in my kettle, that it will clean the kettle. Of any white. I don't have bad beer stone, but it looks like I've got a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always wondered that, putting in that, whether there'd be anything going on if you put it in advance. And it probably does. It'll probably clear off the any sort of dusty deposits of calcium chloride or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually for me, it's milliliters of 88% phosphoric in, 15 liters of water or something.
Does anyone know where you can get phosphoric acid? Because we used to get it from Brewpack, and I have been trying to get it off them for the last 6 weeks. It was the beginning of May when I first emailed them, and he said he'd be getting it in soon, and he kept just ignoring my emails. And I've phoned him 3 times over the last week, and he keeps saying he'll get some. I mean, he'll pack it up and send an invoice, and just refuses to.
I use a place called there's a chemical place that is APC pure.
They won't do it without saying you're a company, which we're not. They used to, but they don't anymore.
It might
Because
be
I bought it off them before.
it might be the same everywhere because it's the regulations now, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
you can get it under a certain percentage. I'm sure I just
Oh
bought
yeah, I think you can get
10 or
30%, but
15.
we've always bought 80%.
Yeah.
Can you get it from aquarium shops?
I don't know. Hadn't thought of that.
It'll be the same thing. All places will be limited to the percentage strength they can sell you without a license or without certification.
I mean, I switched from phosphoric to lactic a while ago because I knew there was going to be problems getting hold of phosphoric eventually. So I don't know why is there a specific reason you have to use phosphoric acid?
No, just we've always used it. That's all.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I picked up this is 75% a few weeks ago from Get a Brewed.
Oh really?
Oh.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's good enough or strong enough for what you want. I mean, I've not used it
Maybe
yet.
they don't mind because they're in Ireland, so
There's no bomb makers there.
the more bombs we make, the better.
Well, they're actually in the north of Ireland, aren't they? So they're actually in the UK.
True. Yeah. Because we started off with Home Brew Company, which is Southern Ireland, and then we went to Get a Brewed, which is Northern Ireland, and then we moved back to the UK ones.
Is this just, are you just using it to acidify your
water?
So yeah, to get 30%, you just need to use 2.5 times the amount, roughly.
Yeah, no, it's just such a waste of I don't know. You're paying extra postage because it weighs more. It's just daft not to be able to buy it in a sort of higher concentrate. But...
Well, there's the problem with the phosphoric acid as well, as you highlighted earlier, is that it does precipitate out your calcium carbonate, isn't it? And you're going to need some of that calcium if you're making hoppy beers.
Yeah.
I've always wondered about that. Yeah, the what's going on with the adding phosphoric acid to a particularly hard water.
Ken said he now uses lactic acid instead of phosphoric because of the difficulties in getting it.
But then I think the trouble is with lactic if you're adding a lot of it, you get a little bit of flavour.
You don't need to add a lot of it because you can get lactic acid at 80%.
Depending on where you are, I suppose, on your water. I mean, I'm adding. I mean, to get my pH right for the beers I'm probably adding 5 or 6 mil to 20. Well, to 30 litres of water, 5 or 6 mil, to get my pH right.
Yeah. Way below the threshold for taste, isn't it? I think.
What pH you take it down to with those amounts?
I'm trying for 5.2, 5.24, 5 or something like that.
Yeah.
At the end of mashing.
I know. So what are you taking the liquor down to?
Not at the 15 minutes in.
And what are you taking the liquor down to then?
Below 6. Oh, sorry. So I don't know what the liquor's going down to, but my pH on when I've done the mash is down to sort of 5.2.
Okay, because when I've just recently been messing around with no sparge, and I found that I'm having to acidify my water much more than I much more than I did when I was sparging, and I guess it's because you've got a greater quantity of water to much less grain. The grist ratio is completely out of whack. And I got, I think, like 5.9 when I tried it with my original, what was working for sparge, for a sparge brew was completely out of whack. And at the moment, I'm heading for sub 5 pH in order to get where I need to be.
Oh, right.
Oh, that's the reason I ask. Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, the only thing on that I would notice is that because I'm sort of measuring the pH 4 or 5 times throughout the mash, these just out of interest.
Yeah.
4 or 5 times throughout the mash, it the sort of traditional 15 minutes in, it's always a lot lower. It goes up towards the end. So say the 15 minutes in, that sort of idea of, if that's what you're aiming for, that aiming for figure's not what it ends up at the end of the mash at all.
And
It's
going
always
up as
probably
it becomes
0.2.
more acidic,
I'm
or
guessing 0.2 higher at the end of the mash from 10, 15 minutes in.
yeah. Yeah.
In fact,
You
I
have to consider alkalinity as well, of
also offer
course.
to do a talk about pH, or at least reading it rather than the whole pH thing. But perhaps I ought to put myself down for a talk.
I'm listening. Shall I offer you?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Go on.
Put me down for pH measurements.
pH measurements. All right.
You have to make sure you include alkalinity in that as well, of course, because the buffering.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I don't want to get too complicated.
Jerome, could you, well, I don't know whether you're interested in it, but would that include pHs at different state, right through to the finished beer as well?
Well, yeah, because I've started doing that a lot. I mean, in fact, I've started toying with I've started adjusting the pH as it goes into the fermenter, and messing around with adding a bit of acid, so that I'm trying to get the fermenter pH lower, because I'm doing a lot of hoppier beer. Oh, I'm doing a lot of hoppier beers these days, so notice that messes around with the pH as well.
I started doing that with lagers quite a lot, because I noticed the pH was coming in at something like 4.6 post ferment, or like 4.7 or something like that. And apart from anything else, you want to get it below 4.6, because so it's kind of bacteria safe. But I found that adding some lactic, even to the keg, I think afterwards, to give it a crispness, like a kick, really made a difference. If you could get it down to something like 4.2 or something for lagers or something, it gives it this really nice, and I was using lactic for that, gives it a really nice crispness. Whereas above that, that whole flabby lager taste that you get sometimes, which is
Or the brew and water, Martin Brungard recommends for those sort of styles, for mashing around about 5.2 for pale, crisper beers. I mean, so that stands to reason. So I've always gone with that, and I think it seems to work. I've not tried a lot doing a pale lager at 5.5, and I wouldn't now, because nothing wrong with how it turns out at 5.2.
There's a good Murphy and Sons kind of PDF printout where it gives the pHs for different stages of the brew, but their ones are for the end of the boil are really low, something like 4.9 to 5.1 or something like that, 5.2.
I must admit, my pH hasn't dropped as much as some of these sites say, where they say at the end of the boil I mean, I just haven't found it that. Even if I find I'm getting 5.2 at the end of the mash, I'm lucky if I tend to get 5 or whatever going into the fermenter, and that's just.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm kind of aiming at those various points. Like, I'm finding at the end of the boil, it's maybe 0.1 lower than it was in the mash. So, I haven't really worked out what happens between the beginning of fermentation and the end of fermentation. What's causing that amount of pH drop? Is it the recipe, or is it the yeast?
Well, it's going to be the yeast. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be creating an more acidic environment.
But I mean, does it vary between yeasts? I mean,
then if you chuck hops in as a dry hop, that pushes the pH, changes the pH. So it suddenly goes higher, more alkaline. because of the hops. And so for hoppy beers, you want to have it as lower because of changing it by dry hopping.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it, Joanne.
I find it such an interesting topic.
It is, it's really
of beer, what pH is best for which style of beer? And I think roasty beers are better if the pH is a bit higher, hoppy if it's a bit lower. Like we said, Pilsner is a bit lower, and what else? The quake yeasts actually reduce the pH a lot more than normal yeasts, and you often get this sort of bite from quake yeast that you don't get from others. All sorts of things. And then your water is really important. How much of a buffer do you have, even though you've got a mash? Yeah, exactly. It's a really complex process. And I think to make amazingly good beer, pH is probably the last thing you look at.
We had a couple of interviews with some like pro brewers, and they were, and I think she was saying like, the one thing we do, the most important thing I do is pay attention to the pH all the way through the process. It's like critical all the way through. You have to hit that point, that point, that point, that point, that point, all the way through
After
to the right
sanitation,
packaging.
after cleaning sanitation.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, just going back to that one.
About 9 on the list.
Just going back to that cleaning and sanitation, one thing I think we didn't mention is the trying to avoid areas that you can't clean, or if you can't clean them, take them apart, but also reducing areas where you're causing abrasion. People using plastic all the time, you use a scourer on a plastic, you're going to create areas where rubbish can, dirt can build up or whatever. So just on that one, I'd say to people, avoid scratching your kit.
Yeah, that was in my speaker's notes, and I forgot to read out a little bit of that while I was talking about the microfiber cloth to use non-abrasive stuff. And my story that I hung it all on, that I've never used anything abrasive, so I know I've never scratched the inside of the fermenters, even though anything can hide anywhere, of course. But no, you're absolutely right. I forgot to mention don't scratch your plastic.
I mean, the temptation is when you've got something that's full of crap is to have a good go at it.
Yeah.
And the temptation is to get in there with something and say, right, I'm gonna, you're gonna go. And of course, in that process, you might be causing some damage,
exactly, leaving something for somewhere to hide next time. That's quite like the yellow smiley face Mr. Scrubby thingy, whatever it was, because that doesn't scratch and it looks funny.
And you can get those different grades of scourers as well. The white ones are allegedly less abrasive than the green ones, and the brown ones or something, and then you go to black, which are gonna scratch anything.
They come with all emojis.
Yeah, only soft stuff in my plastic fermenters.